Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Alright, good afternoon guys, it's Mastergunz here with another video. This time I wanted to go over something I think is a really cool technique that I've been using a lot lately, just because it's so easy to do and it provides a really great visual effect. And that's doing camo striping. You can do camo striping just with the regular, lay down your base coat, pick your contrast color and lay down that color as well. But what I like to do is obviously utilize my airbrush and then get a more natural kind of subtle effect by using base color, shading color, and then silly putty. Stuff is great, won't pull your paint off, it's really cheap, and it's reusable. I've been using the same ball to do everything for about the last, I don't know, year or so since I started doing this technique. So I've already gone through and based this miniature. This is a Shadowhawk 2D, I believe, from Iron Metals for Battletech. And just to, really play off the lore, I think I'm going to do it in Grey Death Legion. So that's a really kind of iconic two-tone camo scheme there, just basic grays with some minor red highlights. And as you can see on this miniature, it's got a lot of great panels and whatnot that would take to the red highlights really well and kind of make the miniature pop as a whole. That, and it's a really cool looking piece. So I've already gone through and laid down the zenithal spray. And if you guys don't know, a zenithal spray is when you put the mini on a flat surface and then you hit it at about 45 degrees from all the top angles all the way around, so that the black primer underneath still shows through in the shadows. And then the German gray from Vallejo model color just lands on the top portion of the model. So then what we'll do is pull off little strips of this and apply our camo striping, and then we'll hit the whole thing with the zenithal spray of cloudy gray, and that's going to provide the contrast. So getting started here, it doesn't take a whole lot of this stuff in order to do this effect. So I'm going to set that miniature back a little bit here so I have some room to work. Just going to pull off a little bit and then just work it into a ball so that it's relatively smooth, and then just break it off into smaller pieces. Alright, so you're going to take those pieces and you're going to kind of roll them out a little bit. Try and put some pressure on the very ends as soon as you get it about as long as you want it. There's really no perfect length to have this at, as each mini is going to be different. Obviously tanks and whatnot, big flat surfaced minis, are going to be easier to do this effect on. Since this is a standing three-dimensional 2 arms 2 legs piece, we're going to have to get a little more creative. But the general principle is the same. So you want to make them right about the same length. They don't have to be perfect. Obviously, it's camouflage. It's meant to break up the lines of something. So something to remember with camouflage, even though oftentimes it seems very random, the key to a good camouflage is realizing that there is a subtle pattern there. And I will show you that, or at least the procedure that I follow to do mine. And this is, again, just personal preference. So another thing to remember as well is keep a toothpick or something handy to kind of tuck the camouflage into where you want it to be. Now, you don't want just perfectly straight stripes, because that's going to look kind of unrealistic. And so what I would say is at various points along the camo, kind of just give it some little bends, pinch it a little bit to give it different layers of thickness. And then I like to start in the middle personally, going right across the chest, since that's typically going to be a focal point for the miniature. And then you want to just kind of press it in. Something to consider as well is that the stripe color is what we'll call it that for now, is what you want to lay down first, because that's what you're basically going to be masking. And so we're going to tuck that underneath there so that we don't have to have, you know, basically just bands wrapped around this piece. And we will track that down underneath the torso, maybe catch a little bit of the top of that hip there. And then try not to crush the point. You just want it laying down on top of it. There we go. Alright, so that's the first one down, going across the front, and you can tease a little bit with the toothpick if you want to make that shape a little irregular. And again, camo, it's meant to break things up. So let's see, for this one, see, we're going to add some space to it, so let's split this in half and make two separate pieces here. So we'll just start that on the hip, kind of wrap it down around the front of the leg. And something that I've just figured out from experience is you want to try and keep the stripes going in the same direction, just for pattern effect. And then what you do to one side, one leg or one arm for example, do the opposite on the other side. And I'll show you what I mean right here. So if we have this stripe right here, we don't want another stripe. Sorry, I'm gonna give a finger out of the way. We don't want another stripe on the top of the leg there, because it's going to look unrealistic. So you're almost continuing the striping down onto the other leg. And we'll kind of just let that go down to the side of the leg there. And again, it's camo, so there's really no right way to do it, as long as it looks good when you're done. And break that one in half as well. I've been working on a lot of cav pieces lately, and so the cav models tend to be a good bit bigger. So I'm used to having to, you know, use some larger spots, larger pieces, as it were. And we'll just have that go right down across the front of the foot and across the back of the calf there. Roll that smooth, put a little bit of a point into it. And again, it's on the inside of the leg, not terribly worried about it. Okay. Let's see, for the arms, we'll go across the front side of the arm there. Just kind of wrap that around. And we're going to need a lot of smaller piece there, so we're going to break this one in half as well. And again, like I said, on the other side, since we went across the top of the shoulder on that arm, we'll go about midway down the arm on this one, on the other side. Okay, so that's what I'm going to basically call the primary striping. Very simple. Now we're going to go through and add some accents. And these are the little bands that are going to serve to really break things up. Let's go about half of that. So these little bands will be about, I don't know, a quarter of the size of what you put on the other one. or for the other pieces that you broke off. So what we're doing here is we're kind of just trying to fill in the spaces, essentially, in between what I called the primary bands earlier. And that's just going to kind of make the finished camo look intentional, I guess. I'll wrap that along the front of the hand. Something else to consider too is when you're planning on doing, hands or feet or accent colors, plan it out a little bit ahead of time. That way you can, terminate one of these pieces somewhere that is going to have a color, so it doesn't have to be, a perfect point. Yeah, that piece is a little too thick than what we want, so we'll break that down into another piece. Now, this might seem like more work than just taking a brush and painting them on manually. But this is just, again, what I like to do because I prefer using an airbrush to lay down base colors. This is just, preferred for me. It takes less time for me to do this than if I was to take a brush and do it by hand. Okay, so let's do a little bit on the other foot. And one more little piece in the back there, I think, and maybe a piece on the gun. And we will call that ready. I think that hip piece there would look good with that. And we'll do it right on the barrel. Okay, I think that's about ready. Alright, so if you kind of pull it back at arm's length and squint at it, the pattern should look relatively even. You know what, maybe one, well, no, I think that's good, actually. Okay, so now we're going to lay down the cloudy gray on it. Let me get that mixed up real quick. So again, this is going to be the most prominent color, and so this will go on second. So my I do get asked what my airbrush mixture is. And typically I like a little thinner, because I'll work the paints up into several very thin shade or thin layers. So I'll normally do a 2-to-1 ratio of paint and thinner with a drop of airbrush flow improver. And my thinner is just the Vallejo brand airbrush thinner, also called reducer if you get it from House of Color, I think is the brand that like Hobby Lobby carries. Those are good paints as well. They dry a little more glossy than I like, but you know, if that's your thing, that's cool. Alright, so let me get my spray catcher here. And check the flow. There we go. Alright, so again, just use the Zenithal spray, 45 degrees, building it up. So I'll typically go 3 or 4 times around in this method to make sure the paint is even, and then I'll pick one of the little sections of silly putty and kind of just lift it up a little bit just to make sure I'm getting the contrast that I want. And I'm gonna go a little bit on the underside there for the more visible parts of the legs, just so it's not so stark and black. I got a little bit of a clog here. Hold on a second. Uh-oh, getting some splatter. Hold on, guys, I gotta thin this paint out a little bit more. There we go. Alright, so now that the base coat's laid down, since the layers are so thin, now I'm going to close that needle gauge a little bit and do a little bit of spot highlighting. And make sure I got good control here. There we are, okay. And then just like in the other videos I've done, I'm going to kind of just lay it on a little thicker on the topmost points. And something to remember too is when you're laying it on, kind of building up those high points, don't be afraid to leave some dark areas because you do want to push that contrast. So, like you see, even though I know light's going to hit this part of the foot as well, I'm only doing the back side of the foot, and that's, again, just to provide contrast. Let's see, and I'm probably going to paint that knee guard red, so I'm not going to really worry about getting that one. But that top of the leg is exposed, so we're going to bring that up a little bit. Front of the foot there. Top of the arm. And top of that shoulder pad, I think. And maybe just that part of the exposed torso. Okay. Oh, and top of that leg. Okay, I think that's, well, let's get a little bit back there as well. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And then we will pull the, another nice thing about the airbrush is it dries super fast. So now, a couple seconds, we can pull this off. Just checking the contrast there, and as you can see, we've got a nice contrast line there. And that putty just comes right off. In fact, when you're painting it, if you're not careful, you can actually knock it off. Alright, so there we go. There is the beginnings of the Grey Death Legion two-tone gray camo. Now it looks really rough right now, but once you give it a black wash, it'll really bring it out. And then, of course, you go through and you add your highlights and all that kind of stuff. So, in fact, while I've got it sitting there, I think I'll go ahead and do that as well. And go ahead and just add the black wash, get it out of the way. Coming up on 22, 23 minutes on this video, so in order to keep the file small, I'll try not to get it beyond 30. So for my black wash, I'm going to go with Citadel Nuln Oil. Let's get my palette here. Now, I never like to use anything other than their Chthonian camo shade right out of the bottle. This one just seems perfectly mixed. Nuln Oil over metallics can be fine, but over any other colors, I find that it kind of darkens them out a little too much. You can use Army Painter Strong Tone too. That stuff is it strong tone or is it heavy tone? Dark tone. I'm sorry, dark tone's their black. You can use the Army Painter Black strong tone in place of Nuln Oil as well if you prefer. Just going to get a little bit into our palette here. And again, it's not going to take a whole lot to do this mini. So just about 4 or 5 brushfuls. And then just a little bit of thinning. In this case, we're going to do, get this up there, Reaper's Drying Retarder. I find that using this to thin your washes helps with pooling and things like that, so the stuff doesn't dry in pools on the surface. Makes it, take a little longer to dry, but it is what it is. All right, so I'm gonna mix that up. And as far as ratios go, I said 4 or 5. Again, I don't have hard ratios for anything. I kind of just go by feel. So if you pull it up along the side of the palette there, see, it's not immediately flowing back down and recessing into the pool there. So that's a pretty good consistency. The old rule of thumb used to be 2% milk is the consistency you want. And so I, for one, just like to start on the legs. You just kind of want to dab it on there, work it into the grooves. That drying retarder will help it flow before it has a chance to set. So you don't have to be quite so neat with it like you would with a Target wash. Okay, that's wash applied. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, go hit this with a hair dryer real quick to get it done, and then show you what it will look like before final highlights. Wash is dry, and so now the final stage before the detail work is to just give it a light dry brushing of cloudy gray just to pick out the details. And this is just going to kind of more or less provide a template for me for when I go through and add the final highlights and detail colors and things like that. Whoa, hey now, sorry, I hit my camera. So as you guys I'm sure are aware, dry brushing is it's a great technique. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Even if you don't use it for your final highlights, it's great for bringing out those details so you can kind of really see what you're working on. And if all you're looking for is just tabletop quality, it's a great way to get there quickly. I mean, by the time I'm done with this dry brush, maybe I've got 30 minutes into this piece so far. So, I mean, if you need to get a force done real quick, this is a great method for doing it. As you can see, you notice I'm hitting the going from the top down to hit the top raised edges, which is, you know, pretty well dry brushing 101. Okay, and that's pretty well as far as I'm going to take it with that. Since I've already got the cloudy gray on the palette, I will show you a little bit of how I do edge highlighting and get a really clean effect by using just the edge of the brush. So the brush I prefer to use for this, I personally really like the Army Painter series of brushes. The highlighting brush is great for control. It's a synthetic bristle, but it holds its edge and tip really well. So I'm just going to get a little bit of paint on the brush there, getting the excess off on the back of your thumb. And then what we're going to concentrate on is the areas that are showing as the lighter gray. So we're going to try and avoid the areas that have the darker gray on them. So when you just use the edge of the brush, as you can see, you get a lot more control to hit those fine angles. So pretty much the rest of it will just be doing that, but just over the entirety of the miniature. But just over the top of the torso there, you can see the kind of effect that just using the edge of your brush to highlight gives. You get a lot of control, and it really makes the miniature pop. Now you can take that a step further with your super fine highlights and use the next gray in the series, and I think that is, I believe it's Reaper Rainy Gray. So I'll probably go back and pick out just some fine details with that. So as you can see, that's what the whole mini is going to look like once it's about all said and done. I won't waste any more of your time with watching me go through and highlight everything, but that's basically the general principle. And then I'll go through after all this and add the minor red highlights, do the cockpit, any contrasting colors I want to do, like paint the hands, you know, metal or jet black or whatever the case may be. But yeah, so that's pretty well how I do the gray on gray camo. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.